ever get that feeling? You know, like something's just not quite right. Like when you see a perfectly still pond and you just know something's lurking beneath the surface.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we're diving into today. The world of dark psychology.
Ooh, interesting.
And before you think this is all about, you know, criminal masterminds and their twisted games, think again.
Okay.
We're talking about how these traits can show up in everyday life.
Really?
Yeah, impacting relationships, work,
Yeah.
even entire communities.
Wow.
Yeah, it's, we're actually working with an excerpt today that really gets into the nitty-gritty of how this all plays out in the real world.
I see.
And, yeah, it can be a bit unnerving.
Yeah.
But trust me, understanding these patterns, it can be really eye-opening.
I can imagine.
So, okay, let's break this down. What are we even talking about here? When we say dark psychology,
Right.
we're talking about very specific personality traits.
Okay.
Ones that can become really harmful when they're taken to the extreme.
Interesting. So which traits are we talking about?
Well, the excerpt really focuses on 3. Narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism.
Right, right. And these are often linked with criminal minds, aren't they?
Exactly.
But you're saying they show up in our everyday lives too.
Yeah, absolutely. And in much more subtle ways, which is what makes them so fascinating, but also, you know, kind of unsettling.
I see. So it's like these tendencies exist on a spectrum.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Okay, so tell me more about how these traits manifest in everyday life. Let's start with narcissism. It's more than just someone who loves themselves a little too much.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. It's way more than that. It goes way deeper. It's this deep-seated sense of entitlement.
Entitlement.
Yeah, like they truly believe they're superior to everyone else.
Wow.
And they often pair that with envy towards anyone who has something they want.
Oh, I see. So they feel superior, but also envious.
Exactly. And they won't hesitate to use others to get what they want.
That's pretty toxic.
It really is. It's almost like their self-esteem depends on putting others down.
It's like they need to feed off of that negativity.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's narcissism. What about psychopathy?
All right, so imagine a lack of empathy so profound they just don't feel guilt.
Wow, no guilt.
No guilt. And they can be incredibly impulsive.
So they act without thinking about the consequences.
Exactly. They're very focused inward.
On themselves.
And they are masters at dodging responsibility.
Oh, I know the type. Always blaming others.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got the narcissist, the psychopath. You said there was a third, right? Machiavellianism.
Yes. This one's a little different, but just as, if not even more, unsettling.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Think about someone who is all about manipulation.
Oh,
They're ruthless in pursuing their goals.
ruthless. How so?
Well, like, they're laser focused on getting what they want no matter who they have to step on to get there.
So the ends justify the means, no matter the cost to others.
Exactly. The excerpt actually compared it to a chess game.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right. They're willing to sacrifice every other piece on the board just to get ahead.
Wow. So these traits individually are obviously problematic. But what happens when they're all combined in one person? That's when things get really scary, right?
That's exactly what the excerpt is getting at. It's like a recipe for disaster, especially in relationships.
It's like a perfect storm of toxic traits.
Exactly. And that's what I want to talk about next. We hear a lot about the criminal side of this, but what about the impact on everyday people? People like you and me.
Right, because it's easy to distance ourselves from, criminals and think, oh, that'll never be me, that'll never be anyone I know. But these traits, they hit closer to home than we might realize.
Exactly. And they can really send shockwaves through every aspect of someone's life, especially their work and personal relationships.
Okay, so let's break those down. What are some signs that someone might be exhibiting these dark personality traits at work?
So imagine a coworker, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And they're constantly struggling with collaboration. They just can't seem to play well with others. Or they're making these rash decisions that end up impacting everyone on the team.
Oh, I see. So their behavior is disruptive and inconsiderate.
Yes. And then in some cases, they might even engage in more shady behavior.
Shady? Like what?
Think, unethical business practices, that kind of thing. And this is especially true if they're in a position of power.
So power really does corrupt, or at least it makes those darker tendencies even more prominent. It's like they have less accountability.
Exactly. And it's not just in the workplace. It seeps into their personal lives, too.
Right, because how could it not? If someone's behaving this way at work, they're probably bringing those same patterns home with them.
Exactly. And that can manifest in a lot of different ways. But one of the most common is this constant need for validation from their partners.
Okay. Validation is like, what do you need?
They need constant praise, attention, reassurance.
Okay, so their partners are probably left feeling emotionally drained.
Oh, absolutely. And it can escalate from there.
Escalate? Like how?
We're talking manipulation tactics, maybe even resorting to verbal, emotional, or even physical abuse. The emotional toll on their partners, and especially their children, can be absolutely devastating.
It's like their own personal darkness ends up casting a shadow on everyone around them.
That's a powerful way to put it, and that's exactly why it's so important to be able to recognize these red flags.
I completely agree, both in our own lives and in the relationships we see around us. Because if we can spot these patterns early on, maybe we can prevent things from escalating to that point.
Exactly. But the excerpt doesn't just stop there. It goes on to talk about this ripple effect of dark psychology.
A ripple effect. So it's not just contained to individual relationships.
No, it goes way beyond that. It's about the wider impact on society as a whole.
Okay, now you're really getting my attention. Tell me more about this ripple effect.
Well, when you look at communities with a higher concentration of people who exhibit these dark personality traits, there's often a strong correlation with higher crime rates as well.
Oh, wow. So you're saying it's like these negative behaviors, they become contagious in a way?
That's what it seems like. And while the source makes it very clear that it doesn't mean everyone in a high crime area is inherently bad.
Of course not.
It does make you think about the influence these traits can have on the people and the environment around them.
It's like that old saying, one bad apple spoils the bunch. Not that people are apples, but you get the idea.
Exactly. And this is where it gets even more complex, because there's also this cyclical nature to dark psychology.
What do you mean cyclical?
Well, the excerpt talks about how victims of abuse, especially children, are more likely to become abusers themselves.
Oh, that's heartbreaking. But it makes sense, right? If that's all you've ever known, it becomes your normal.
Exactly. And early trauma can have such a significant impact on brain development,
Right.
which can then lead to these really extreme reactions, even violence.
That's awful. So it's like this vicious cycle repeating itself generation after generation.
It really is. In fact, the excerpt even brings up temporary insanity, those cases where someone snaps under pressure.
Right. But is that a real thing? Or is it just an excuse?
It's a fascinating question, and I think it speaks to the immense strain that trauma and these dark personality traits can put on someone's mind. For some people, snapping might be fleeting, a momentary lapse in judgment fueled by anger or fear. But for others, it can be a turning point.
A turning point.
Yeah, it's like it pushes them over the edge toward those darker impulses, which can have devastating consequences.
Wow, that's chilling. So it sounds like this deep dive is really about more than just understanding these dark traits. It's about understanding the lasting impact they have, not just on individuals, but on entire communities, even across generations.
You got it. And it makes you realize that we can't just ignore this. We have to talk about it, understand it, so we can protect ourselves and the people we care about. And, it can be subtle, too.
Well,
it's not always obvious, like, boom, this person is manipulating me.
Right.
It can be this gradual thing.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's that slow creep, where you start to question yourself.
Yes.
Your own judgment.
Exactly.
Your instincts. You're walking on eggshells all the time, and you don't even realize it's happening.
It's like they're projecting their own, their own darkness onto you.
Yeah, it's like their negativity becomes contagious.
Yes. And if you're not careful, it takes root.
Exactly. And that's where the real danger is, because when we start to lose ourselves like that, when we let those dark traits chip away at our own sense of self-worth, we become so much more vulnerable.
Oh, yeah.
We're more likely to be manipulated. We tolerate bad behavior.
It's like we lose the ability to set those healthy boundaries. We talked about that before, but it's true. It creates this vicious cycle.
It does. It absolutely can. But the good news is that it's not inevitable.
Okay, good.
Recognizing it, that's the first step.
Yeah.
Just being aware of what's happening, that potential for losing ourselves. That's huge.
So how do we do that? How do we break free from that cycle?
Well, for starters, we have to reclaim our power.
Okay.
Our own voices, our own sense of worth. The excerpt actually shares a story about a woman who managed to rebuild her life after experiencing this kind of loss.
Really? So there's hope.
Oh, absolutely. There's always hope. And that's what's so important to remember.
Okay.
This isn't about labeling people as good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's about recognizing those harmful patterns.
Okay.
Understanding the impact they can have. and learning how to protect ourselves and the people we care about.
That's a really important distinction. It's not about writing people off. It's about understanding them, understanding the patterns, and learning to protect ourselves.
Exactly. And the more we understand these things, these darker aspects of human nature,
Yeah.
the better equipped we are to navigate them.
I like that. It's like equipping ourselves with a roadmap.
Exactly.
So we can, avoid those treacherous paths, those pitfalls. But it's not just about self-preservation, is it? It's also about being able to build a more informed and empathetic society.
Right. A society where we can better support those who have been affected by these kinds of behaviors.
Because let's face it, we've all brushed up against some form of this darkness, whether we realized it at the time or not. Maybe it was that coworker, the one who always seemed to be like pulling strings in the background.
Right.
Or that partner who was just a little too controlling.
Or even, maybe it's a friend.
Yeah.
Someone who every time you hang out with them, you leave feeling drained.
Yes. That's a good point. And sometimes we just brush those experiences off.
We do.
Like, it's no big deal.
Yeah.
But the thing is,
Yeah.
even those small encounters, they can still leave a mark.
They do. Every interaction leaves an impression, right?
Exactly. So as we're wrapping up this deep dive here, I want to leave everyone listening with this. Pay attention to those gut feelings.
Yes.
Those times when something just feels off about a situation or a relationship.
Trust your instincts.
That's important.
The excerpt even talks about how often those gut feelings are our subconscious picking up on those subtle red flags.
It's like our internal warning system going off.
Exactly.
And we have to listen to it.
We do.
Don't be afraid to, seek support if you need it.
Absolutely.
Or even just create some distance from those situations that are unhealthy.
Yeah. Sometimes you just need to step back and protect yourself.
Yes. Because protecting your own light, your own well-being, that's just as important as recognizing those shadows out there.
It is.
You know what I mean?
I do. And sometimes that's the bravest thing you can do. Just step away from the darkness and step into your own strength.
It really is. Well said. And on that note, that is a wrap on our